hello, and welcome to another install of our program. And in this program, we're going to talk about homelessness, a problem that has been plaguing our city for a very long time. It is one of the issues that hit us head on, and unfortunately, we can't escape. And to help us to go through this is Greg, our good friend. He's one of the few Americans who attend our church. So, our family moved into Portland in 1989. It was a very nice, clean city of roses. There was very few homeless people. I remember that there was a few downtown on Burnside where there is a rescue mission. Mm-hmm. There was always a couple of them hanging around there, but it was a few. But things have changed. I recall about 15 years ago plus, we first saw one or two on the exit ramps at 205. There would be a person standing with a sign, and that was very exceptional. It was maybe one or two people in the whole city of Portland, mm-hmm. But then there was more and more and more, and right now it is a huge problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can go through statistics, and we will, but what's with statistics if all you have to do is get outside and you see someone? I stop by the store, say Home Depot or any other store, and before I get out of the car, there's someone waiting at the door asking for money, asking for help. Mm-hmm. And it is a huge problem that is plaguing the city. And if you look at the basic statistics, the Census Bureau said that in 2017, Oregon had 38,000 homeless people. 38,000, it's a modest town.
Mm-hmm. That's a conservative estimate.
Yes.
The numbers are likely much higher.
You're right, it is hard. I mean, how do you count homeless people? It's not like they live in a house.
Right.
It's not like you can mail them something and ask them a question. So it is very difficult. The very same census said that in Multnomah County alone, at any given point of time, there is 4,000 people living on the street. Just Multnomah County alone. It's a big county, but that's a lot of people. And they have to stay somewhere. They're under a bridge, they're under an overpass, they're somewhere in abandoned lot, or they might be next to a business. And I mean, they're everywhere. It's not something that could be hid. It's not something that we could run away from. And again, officials provide different numbers, but it is hard to lean on those numbers, and those numbers really don't matter. If wherever you go, I know Springwater Corridor, mm-hmm. The bike trail, we used to go there. It was very nice, clean, and you could go and enjoy the nature. And right now, if you go there, it is terrible. You see trash everywhere. You see ragged people. You see, and you know, before it used to be where it would be men in their middle 40s, but now you see old people.
Yes.
You see kids. I mean, I know I use the bike trail very often, and sometimes I can hear babies crying in a tent. Mm-hmm. And it's not even a tent, it's just a tarp. Mm-hmm. And my heart breaks. I mean, you want to help those people, but how do you help them? How do you help people that you find it difficult to come up to them and to talk to them? So you do that rather regularly. So how do you do that? Tell me about some of the ministry and some of the work that you do.
Sure. So my name's Greg Ross. I've been a member of the church for 12 years now. And I've been involved in serving the poor for probably 6 years. And what I do is just go out onto the street, approach people and start a conversation with them. Try to figure out where they're from, mm-hmm. if they have family, if they have any addictions or things that they're struggling with, if they have any immediate needs that we can help them with, and just try to develop some kind of rapport with them.
So when you say you go up and talk to them, for a person like me, I find it difficult. So how do you just come up to a person and say, hello, my name is Greg, and
yes.
What's your name?
Exactly.
Or how do you start a conversation with these people?
It is that simple. And there's a couple of groups of people that are aggressively going out, seeking out these people. Jehovah's Witnesses, mm-hmm. Mormons, LDS Church, mm-hmm. And they're rather aggressive. They want to come up and they'll be argumentative sometimes with them. What we do is we take a totally different approach and we just look to get to know them and be friendly with them.
So how do they respond? Are they happy to talk to you? Do they find surprising that you want to talk to them?
99% of the time, they're surprised because they don't understand what my agenda is. My agenda is simply to get to know them and be friendly with them. So, and I usually bring them something. We'll bring them food, or we'll bring them clean socks, something that is much needed for them. And the first interaction, it's a meet and greet. It's getting to know you. I make a point to remember their first name, whatever first name they give me. That might or might not be their real name.
Correct.
But the second time, the third time, the fourth time, when they talk to me, then the dynamic starts to change a little bit. Because they're bombarded by people who come out, they have a single interaction with them, maybe take a selfie with them, post it on Facebook to show that they're doing something for the homeless. But in my case, it's a little bit different because what we're looking to do is literally what God calls us to do in Isaiah 58, which is to get out and love and serve those people that are poor and needy. And what happens is when you do that, they figure out very quickly that you're from the church. They figure out very quickly that you're there representing Jesus Christ. And you find that without necessarily needing to approach them with the topic, they'll start talking to you and asking you questions. So it's a great way to begin talking to them. Now, for the normal person that's driving around Portland, when they pull up to the stoplight, they see the homeless person.
Right.
They have an aversion. They don't want to look at them. They feel a little bit threatened by their presence. It's easy to lock the door, roll up the window, turn your music up a little bit higher, and just completely pretend that they're not there. But what you find is that once you get out and you talk to them, they're not as scary as you might think that they are. And they're people, they're human beings.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it bothers us because on one hand, we understand these are human beings. These are people that are, in many respects, just like us.
Right.
But on the other hand, you find yourself completely alienated. You can't really find any common ground. I mean, what do you offer them? How do you talk to them?
Yeah, so there's do's and don'ts. What you don't want to do is come up to them and say, hey, where'd you buy that shirt, right? So you don't want to point out something that they're self-conscious about.
Correct.
Oftentimes they're not feeling like they represent their best selves. They're dirty, they haven't showered or bathed in usually a while. And some of them are in various stages of drug addiction. So they're self-conscious, maybe they're missing teeth, or maybe they have sores or something. So it's very important that you just open it up with some light conversation. Do you have any family in the area? You know, what kind of work do you do when you work, right? Get them talking about things that they like. I like to ask them, do you believe in prayer? And get them talking about prayer. And that's a great way to kind of open up the conversation in a non-threatening way and just start building some rapport. But you know, Dima, what's most difficult for young people in particular, in this age of social media, right? Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the young people now don't understand how to talk to people that they've never met. They don't teach them that anymore. When I was a kid, they used to teach us how to approach a stranger and how to talk to someone, how to be polite, how to make conversation, not to be rude to that person. What I've found is that today we have a lot of young people that were never taught that skill. They don't understand how to come up to someone and talk and start talking to them. They don't even know where to begin or what to say. And that, I think, is also a huge barrier for young people who are perfectly aged for that kind of outreach. That's a big barrier and an obstacle for them.
Well, I hear you, but at the same time, I find even myself, I know I can talk to just about anyone, but I do find it difficult to speak to a homeless person. And we come to a predicament to where I know that our community is very generous. I mean, I know our church helps thousands of people, literally thousands of people. We have ministries for blind, for quadriplegics, for handicap. I mean, we've got all kinds of ministries. We have a whole line of church service that just helps people. And all of it is addressed to one group or another, but nothing for homeless in particular.
Yeah.
And I know that there are a lot of people who talk about help, but very few people really help. And here we find some sort of a barrier where we want to help, but we don't know how.
Yeah.
So the topic of our program and the whole goal of us talking right now is to see what causes this problem. That would be number one. Number two, are we immune to it? I mean, we see, I look at these people and I'm like, wow, how did they end up there? But am I immune? I mean, could I be there on the street? And we will play some of the videos that you have recorded on the streets.
Yeah.
And I heard this one man talking about his life, and he was just like me. He was in construction.
That's right.
And he ended up on the street. You know, when I listened to him,
Yeah.
I was depressed for a few hours. I couldn't get my bearing because I'm like, wow, this could happen to me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I have a house, I have a family.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, Dima. After watching that video, which people will see, do you feel like you could talk to him now if you saw him?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because first I see that he is not a monster. He's a person.
Right.
He has something in common with me, and he's not a lost person.
Right.
I mean, he has.
That's right.
His brain is there. He can speak. He can communicate.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I had run across people who couldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. So my hope is that viewers will watch that video, and just as you have made that realization with his situation and some of the similarities that you have with him, my hope is that people will see that video and realize there are homeless people that I could talk to, that I could reach out to. Maybe there are some that I don't feel comfortable with, but there are some that I could, right? That's my hope. So I know you told me your story, but can you share kind of your story of what happened, how you ended up living in a tent here off of 205,
Sure.
and kind of just give us the story of what happened?
Yeah, I was working for a company called, as a general contractor for, subcontractor for Syntex Homes. And we built custom frame homes out in Sherwood area. And I got bumped, that's what they said, but I got bumped over by a thing of trusses and fell off the roof. And my hip came out the side of my back and ruptured 3 discs. I'm trying to remember it all because it was pretty, you know.
Yeah. And Rick showed us, we're not going to show it on camera, but he has a large scar on his lower back where he had the surgery, right?
Right,
to,
the hip, and then the other one is a little small one. On my back part, they gave me this thing called a microlaminectomy, which was great. I mean, I went in at 4 in the afternoon and walked out noon the next day without a pain man, not one. And I'd been on like pain management for, I don't know, 2 years before that, so to me it was a relief.
Yeah.
But then they didn't tell you this, but like 18 months to the day, the next one. And they said, I'm like 1 in 12 Americans that happens to. They'll do one back surgery, and then it needs another and another and another. So that, you know, that kind of can't keep going on either. It's too much for our country and too much for anybody. You know, I mean, flat, I didn't say ruin me because I wouldn't have what I have now, which is I love my son and my wife, but it did change my life. You know, and I did have a pretty nice place and out and boring. And after all that kind of took its toll, you know, it basically ruined me in my relationship for 21 years with my ex-wife. And she was more into something else, money, than anything, which is okay. That's her business, you know, and we split. And that's okay because I went on my own. And
now, some people would say, one of the things that I hear quite a bit from talking to people is, oh, you know, there's plenty of work available. People are, you know, if they're living on the street, they could probably get a job and start working.
That's not true. That is not true.
Talk about that for a second, right?
First off, they vet you now like you're buying a car or a home. You know, I mean, I've owned houses in California and stuff like that, and from a town called Mariposa by Yosemite. Anyway, they check on your credit income, your credit score, and all that, and some people have good credit, some people don't. If we had good credit, we wouldn't be out here, you know, and so that makes it a little bit hard.
And you're a general contractor.
Right, well, I was. Now I've let my numbers go because I can't do it anymore, you know.
And how old are you?
I'm 60, almost 62.
62.
Yeah, I'll be 62 May 2nd.
So as a 62-year-old with a serious back injury and a hip injury, it really would be hard for you to go back to work as a general contractor or
Oh,
get
yeah.
hired to do that work, right?
Right. Well, it's hard. The bad part is, like me, I can, at night, I sleep every 15 minutes. I got to turn one side, the other, and then lay flat on my back.
Sure.
And so it's like, I would love to. I could do a lot of things, but I can only do them repetitively for a short amount of time. And people, some of them do their best to understand that, and a lot of them, have given me, a couple of hour jobs here and there, and they're happy with my work, but I can't do it every day in and day out. I'd love to, and that's the problem too, and that's Rick's problem as far as that's how I got into this situation, was having some health issues. And the other thing that I did that was my fault is I believed back in the system when they said, oh, don't worry about it. Social Security will be there, you'll be able to retire, and I believed that, I really did. And I found out.
What does that Social Security benefit look like for a person your age?
$780 a month.
$780 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough to get housing and food and clothing and everything that you need for your family?
My last place that we just were evicted for, we fell in the rears, and it was $750 a month. But then you got electrical, you got phone, and you can't survive without a phone, not with a child these days, And that's my my blessing, or whatever you want to call it, because I consider him a blessing and her too, But it's just not enough, and I know that, to me, I don't think there's with how our country is and what we're capable of doing, it doesn't make sense to be in this situation. I do understand. I can totally understand the garbage and the waste and all that stuff, how disgusting it is. But if somebody were to put together a 10 acre lot, fence it, put 2 guards there, 2 trash can dumpsters, and a bathroom for men and women, they would be spending pennies to the dollar on what they do, just cleaning up the garbage from the homeless, responding to calls and stuff like that. And I think that maybe that's not the one set answer, but it's like with homelessness, it's like the saying that, God didn't, flies don't create garbage, Same thing happened with us. We're victims basically of some of our own greed. And, I admit back in the day when I was making a lot of money, I thought it was, hey, this is going to go on forever, and I think education is very important, especially the younger they are. I don't like my 6-year-old going through some of the stuff, but he doesn't go without. I defy anybody to talk to him, ask him, or whatever. He knows what love is. He knows what good, right, and wrong is. He knows about being kind and polite and sharing and talking to people, and he doesn't see color. And that's the important part. I really believe in that. I believe, we're going to have color crises for as long as people recognize it, and as long as they just don't see them as human beings or human becomings,
So let's go through some of the topics that I'd like to address. And number one, well, how do people end up on the street? I mean, politicians are telling us that it's all because of the prices for housing, that it is so expensive a person can't afford a decent housing. Is this so? Would that be the number one reason?
Well, we've seen, particularly in the state of California, a lot of people who have lived in California neighborhoods for quite some time are now struggling to pay the rent, and they end up in an RV parked on the side of the street. And it's a very sad situation. I drove through parts of San Francisco last year, and I saw streets with so many RVs parked on each side, you couldn't see the end of the line.
Well, but by the way, Oregon is number 7 out of all 50 states in homeless population.
Right.
So if you can imagine how bad it is here, we're number 7. It is much worse in California, certain parts of New York, and other states.
I would say that it's a contributing factor, but it's not the cause. Right. I would say that it plays a role.
Correct.
But it's not the cause of homelessness.
Well, because when they say so, I mean, I live in Gresham area, in greater Portland area. I know that there are much nicer neighborhoods, say in Lake Oswego or West Lynn. I can't afford, that's why I live there. And when you say that some of the housing is too expensive, well, can't you move into where housing is a little bit cheaper?
Yes, you could.
And
Absolutely.
Can't you go to a state where it is a little bit cheaper? I mean, what do you have to lose? You're already homeless.
Right.
It's not like you're losing a house.
That's right.
And most of them are out of work as is.
That's right. So we know that factor by itself cannot cause homelessness. And I disagree with that fundamental premise. I think that it's a contributing factor. But you also have family.
Well, that's the
that
thing.
you could call, right?
And that would be my question is, I mean, I have a father, I have a mother, and if, God forbid, they had lost all their livelihood, would I not take them into my house?
Of course.
And I personally see old people sitting on the street, just on the pavement. Don't they have family? Don't they have kids? Don't they have brothers or sisters or uncles or aunts who would take them in? What's happening? What's happening with the family?
So to get to the root of what's causing homelessness, you're right. That there is a lot of the homeless people I talk to don't have immediate family that they feel comfortable interacting with.
Where is it? When you say they don't have it, where are they at?
Those people are alive. They're living somewhere. But when you really trace it back, and actually in the video, we also spoke to a woman whose daughter was homeless.
Correct.
And is a drug addict and also a victim of sex trafficking. When you go back and you actually look at the root cause, there were traumatic, painful events that happened to these people when they were children that ultimately lead to them being homeless. There's a seed of pain that's planted in their heart, and it ultimately leads to them being homeless. All of these other things, the drug addictions, the alcoholism, the high price of housing, all of those are contributing factors. But in a lot of cases, that is the root cause.
So we could easily say that the breakup of the family would be a number one contributing factor to homelessness.
Absolutely.
And if the family was strong, if the family was together, none of it would happen.
The breakup of the family, serious abuse perpetrated by one of the parents, addiction and substance abuse in the family, a lot of these things that we recognize as symptoms of a larger disease, sin.
Right. Well, that was my next question. I mean, keeping a family together is difficult, but how do you keep a family together with no religious affiliation? If you don't believe in Christ, if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in consequences, heaven, hell, and everything else,
that's right.
Selfishness takes over. I mean, how do you keep a family?
It's extremely difficult. And, you know, we have a young child in our neighborhood who is 9 years old. His parents were just divorced. And I see him walking around on the street when the weather's, 30 degrees outside. No coat, shorts, a t-shirt. And I see him and I'm very concerned about him because I know, seeing the other side of that, the end of the story, that a lot of homeless addicts started that way. There was some pain there, the family broke apart. And you're right, there's a selfish desire on the part of the parents and nobody's looking out for the child. Nobody cares. The father moves away and does his own thing. The mother moves in with her new boyfriend, and who's left to suffer and walk around the street with no coat?
Children.
It's the child. Yes. And I think that, Dima, in each of our neighborhoods, we have an opportunity to be more aware of those children and to take them into our home, invite them for dinner, share something with them.
I think,
give them a coat when you see them.
What you're asking is to me. I mean, I don't want to ask someone else to do things that I myself don't want to do. But with all the liberal ideology and all the child abuse and everything else that goes on, you invite child over, someone will say you're a predator. You're trying to take advantage of a child. And all you want to do is you want to help someone.
Yeah, that's right. So let me give you an example. This young man who lives in our neighborhood has a necklace with a crystal on it. And I asked him about it, and he said, my mother celebrates solstice. His mother celebrates these old kind of pagan solar cycle holidays, right? Not a Christian. And he was very outspoken about her belief and some of those pagan principles that she lives by. She's not an atheist, she's actually a pagan. We invited him for dinner, and it was like, and we invited him as a family. My wife, my children, and I, we invited him to dinner. We asked his father if it would be okay. His father didn't really care. And he showed up at our dinner table, and it was like his first day in heaven. He got to eat this delicious food. He told my wife, he said, your cooking is the best thing I've ever tasted. And one day he spent the night with my son, and he found my son's illustrated Bible. And Dima, he stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning. He read every page.
You've never read it before.
He didn't even know what the Bible
He lives
was.
in America, which is considered to be a Christian nation,
That's
and he
right.
had never seen a Bible.
He'd never seen a
in his
Bible. He
life.
didn't know anything about Jesus. And it was one of those fun illustrated kids' Bibles. And he stayed up all night reading it. And those are the little things that we can do to... Now, you can go, like I do and like my team does, and you can talk to homeless people on the street. But if you really want to get to the root cause of homelessness, find those children in your neighborhood and love them.
So there is obviously some things that we could do to help others. But before we head there, I would like to address our own people, because we are not immune to this.
No.
And I would say, and I would beg everyone who's listening to us right now to please keep your family strong.
Yes.
Keep your family strong, raise them
Yes.
as Christians, because yes, it might be difficult. It might cost you something. But believe me, you and I, we're going to get old, and we're going to get old very quick.
It's happening every day.
And we will need someone to help us out.
That's right.
And even just teaching our children some basic principles to get
That's right.
basic education, get married, don't have kids outside of wedlock.
That's right.
Those are at least some simple things that will
Yes.
that will keep them. Otherwise,
Yes.
I mean, I personally see, and I work in construction, and I see our own young kids. They're 16, 17 years old. Their parents are fully assimilated. They are American citizens. Now, those kids, they drop out of school. They decided education is not for them. Even high school education. We're not talking about college or university.
Sure.
They drop out of school. They have no real jobs. I mean, what they do is they carry siding or they carry tile to upper floors, and that's all that they're good for. And that's while they're healthy. At the same time, I see that they smoke, they drink. Some of them are drug addicts. Some of them, they're only 17, 18 years old. They're already been to rehab a few times.
Right.
And it is mind-boggling, because how are they going to support the family?
Very difficult.
I mean, I can totally see some Russians ending up on the street. And it is heartbreaking, because you know that there are some people who are in similar situations, even poorer. Some people don't even speak a word of English, but they have businesses, they are in the church, they have strong families, they feel secure. So, I mean, you as an American here, compared to us who are first-generation immigrants,
Yeah.
I mean, don't you see some kind of regression in American values, in
Yes.
American Christianity,
Yes.
that is actually coming up on us?
Yes, absolutely. I do. And, you know, it's no mystery that America today is sort of living in a post-Christian era. I think it's safe to say that at one point in America, God was the foundation for a lot of what we did as a society, in our government, in our families. And over time, we have become lukewarm. We're living in the world, we're embracing the things of the world, and we're kind of like in Revelation chapter 3, we've left God outside and he's knocking on the door now. But I think that to the Slavic families, the fathers especially, we have to do a good job of keeping the family together. How do we keep it together? We center it around Jesus Christ. But also we have to make sure that there's love there. There's love there. We have to make sure that we are known for our love to our sons and our daughters. They have to feel loved. So people don't just, to your point, they don't just walk into rehab someday with a drug addiction.
Correct.
Once that seed of pain is planted, they go out and there are people out there ready to prey on them. The drug dealers, the
Right.
gangs, the sex traffickers. If a young woman has a baby outside of marriage, she's a prime target for sex traffickers. They will use the baby as leverage against her to force her to do things. There are all of these predators waiting out there for your children if you don't keep them Christ-centered and love them. If that seed of pain gets planted from severe abuse, from breakup of the family, they are exponentially more likely to fall into the hands of those
Right.
predators and end up homeless. And I see it every single day. I see Russian young people on the street homeless. I've talked to some of them, and it's very sad.
Correct. And again, we just want to reiterate, just being Russian or Ukrainian is not going to save you. If you lose Christ, if you lose your goal in life as becoming a Christian and living a godly lifestyle,
That's right.
You might end up there just as easy as anybody else.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, your family can carry you only so far.
Right. That's
And
right.
like in the video that we have there, where a daughter is a drug addict and she steals from the family, she takes from the family. I mean, how much can that be tolerated? Yeah, maybe one time, maybe two times, but when things start disappearing from your home and it makes your livelihood impossible, I mean, how long can it last?
This young woman didn't grow up in a Christian home. She didn't have that loving atmosphere or environment. There was pain and trauma for her at a very young age that led to her going off course. And we see it over and over and over again. I mean, I get pretty deep into background and conversation with the people that I talk to. And 99% of them have that pain in their heart. They'll tell you stories about being physically abused by their parents. They'll tell you stories about parents who abandoned them, who left them to pursue love interests or whatever the case might be. I hear it, it's like a drumbeat. Every day I hear it from these people. And that's where it starts. And that's where we can work within our own families to prevent homelessness. Because absolutely, your son or your daughter could end up being homeless if that seed of pain is planted there. 100%.
So, to the next point, one of the problems that is always brought up is mental illness. That people that are on the streets, they're mentally ill, they can't carry conversation, they're incoherent, it is difficult to talk to them, so they're mentally ill. I mean, it is so easy to label people as mentally ill. And I mean, how did you determine? Did you take them to psychiatrists, psychologists? How did you determine that they are mentally ill?
Right.
And then, I mean, you put any one of us on the street for a month,
Right.
I'm sure something's going to turn in our heads. I mean, how
That's
do
true.
you stay sane
That's
if
true.
you have no roof over your head?
Right.
If you're insecure, if every single day you wake up you don't know where you're going to get your meal,
Right.
if somebody going to get into your tent,
Right.
rob
That's
you
right. That's
or
right.
beat you up or cause you some bodily harm,
Right.
how long can you go without going insane?
That's right.
That I don't see how this could even be any sort of factor.
Dima, I know I don't have to tell you this, but the city of Portland did not come out with a statement, last time I checked, I'd have to go back and look, saying that the root cause of homelessness is a lack of Jesus Christ. They have already put Jesus Christ out.
They don't want him.
They're now looking for ways that they can rationalize that this is happening when we all know what the root cause is. They will tell you it's mental illness, it's a housing crisis, it's this, it's that, it's drug addiction. But that's not the root cause. And for me as a Christian, I've gone through a pretty dramatic evolution in my thinking because I was born again at the age of 23. Right? I didn't live as a Christian or grow up in a Christian home. I don't believe in mental illness. I don't think that mental illness exists. I think it's a spiritual issue.
Let me put it this way. Listening to very smart and acknowledged psychiatrists, they all say that if mental illness is the only problem that you have, people can help you. Medication can help you. There are some things that can help you. Now, if you add to this poor lifestyle, addictions, horrible choices, horrible moral choices, no one can help you. And I was actually listening to Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you are familiar with his work or not. But he was very specific that if you have mental illness and you are addicted and you are an alcoholic, no one can help you. That's it. Because one of these three will always kill you.
Yeah.
You can't get out.
Yeah.
And I understand that there might be cases where people do need help and medical help. But I doubt that those people who are on the street, that's their only problem.
Yeah.
That's their only
Right.
detriment, and now they can't function.
In the Christian world, we would say that they're under layers of bondage. And it
Correct.
is very difficult to liberate them from those layers. But we can't liberate them. Only Jesus can liberate them. We, Dima and Greg, we can try as hard as we want to. We can't accomplish that. That's something that has to be done by Jesus Christ. I believe that our role in this struggle is to represent Jesus Christ to them. And through our interaction with them, show them Jesus Christ. If we can do that and we can get the word into their hands, we have a much better chance at saving them from that bondage. Because that battle is fought by the Lord.
Well, I don't know too many cases because I'm not. It's not part of what I do on a daily basis. But I do know at least one person who was a complete homeless bum living on the street. He met one of my friends who is also a pastor in a different church. So he talked to them. He led them to Christ. He also gave him a work to do in his business. And he introduced him to me, and he looked a completely normal person. I mean, he turned his life around. He works. He functions.
Yes.
And he's
Praise the
like,
Lord.
that person was on the street.
Right.
As a gone, people would just go right by him.
Right. Praise the
So
Lord.
there is a way to get out of it, but you got to start at your root cause. And that's why we began this, not with the remedies, but, well, what's the root cause? How do people end up there? And like you said, if they have no faith, then there's no reason. I mean, why? Why even try? Why not just kind of look up to the state and hope that someone will bring you some food, and someone will bring you shelter, and someone will give you cheap houses, and someone will give you... But how's it all going to work?
Nobody ever reintegrated into society from being homeless because they received a ham sandwich.
Correct.
Or because they had a roof put over their head. But I know many people that reintegrated into society from being homeless who did that because of Jesus Christ. That's why. And we actually have in our church, Dima, an American member who was formerly homeless.
Yes, and you've introduced him to me, so I know who that is.
He has a better church attendance record than I do. So, and he has come to an understanding and a belief in Jesus Christ. And it was through the love of some young volunteers from our church, some young people who couldn't sing. They didn't feel like they could really do the choir thing. They didn't know what else to do, and so they gave homeless ministry a shot. And those 4 young women that talked to him under my supervision actually ended up bringing him to church. And he still goes to our church to this day, and it's been at least 4 years now. So it is possible through Jesus Christ for people to reintegrate and to come in. But we have to, we're representatives of the kingdom. We have to go out and represent the kingdom to them.
And part of the reasons why, or one of the reasons why we're doing this program is to maybe see if we could jumpstart this program again and see if that could be reestablished. So the next question would be substance abuse, because people that are on the streets, most of them do have some sort of substance abuse, either alcohol or drugs. How do you see that problem? I mean, what kind of just baffles me, I can't understand, why would people open up marijuana shops and introduce people to narcotics, to drugs? I mean, how is this supposed to help everyone? Since they've opened them up, is there less people on drugs? Or is there more?
No.
I mean,
There's definitely more.
How do you even reconcile this? We're going to open this up. We're going to start introducing you to narcotics, and at the same time thinking that there's going to be less of you out there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, there, people that are prone to drug addiction. Now, there's a false narrative out there in the world that says that you're genetically prone to drug addiction if you're a certain type of person. Right? But where people are driven to drug addiction in reality is to numb the pain that they have in their heart. Whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's heroin, whether it's meth, whether it's marijuana, these people that are addicted to those substances are trying to bury a pain that they have in their heart. And it's the only way that they feel that they're able to do that. And drug addiction, by the way, does not only come in the form of controlled substances like marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamines, but also by way of prescription drugs, opioids,
Right.
antidepressants. We struggled with a young woman in the Slavic community who became addicted to antidepressants and took her life as a result of that. And antidepressants are extremely dangerous. But these substances they all serve the same purpose, and that is to alter your state of mind and to inhibit you from actually having meaningful conversations and coming to Jesus through people that you interact with. It's a play that the enemy uses to drive people further down the drain. And we see it time and time again. And don't think that there's not a spiritual component to that, because there absolutely is.
Well, I think there is a spiritual component to everything that we do in life.
Absolutely.
Because,
Absolutely.
church fathers used to say that a spirit creates a form for itself. So if your spirit is bent in a certain way, you would always find a form, be it drugs, or be it alcohol, be it marijuana, or whatever else. But when a government says, well, if we provide people with clean needles,
injection sites.
we will provide them with free drugs, we'll
Right.
provide them with a clean, medically secure room where they can do
Right,
this,
right.
that would resolve a problem. Is it going to resolve a problem, or just make it worse?
I don't think that approach ever resolved a problem. I could be mistaken, but I know that that does not resolve the problem. It only makes it worse. Look, there's only one thing that's going to resolve that problem, and it's Jesus. It's Jesus. We need to show these people another way to resolve their pain besides drowning it with substance abuse.
So simply giving them money, giving them free drugs, giving them some sort of a safe haven where they could do all this is not going to work. I mean, I
No.
can't even imagine that it's going to create a drug hub, or what is it going to do when you do this?
Yes, it does. It's not going to solve anything. The only way that we can we know this, it's common sense to us, but we know that there's a moral way for people to come out of that pain, right? And that's through Jesus. But the world doesn't want you to believe that there's such a thing as right and wrong. They don't want you to think that drugs are bad anymore. That's why they're in this rush to legalize all of the drugs.
Right.
Because we're living in this kind of world universalism where everything's okay and nothing's wrong. Nothing anymore is right or wrong. And if you try to tell somebody that it is, you're the bad person for speaking up and voicing an opinion. We have to cling to our understanding
Right.
of the word. We have to, as believers.
And that's where the difficulty comes in, like we've talked in the beginning, to where you want to help people, but at the same time you understand, well, these are the choices that these people make. Why do I need to underwrite them? Why do I need to pay for choices that someone willingly makes?
Yeah. Not
And-
only should we not underwrite that, we should be out there trying to show them a better path, a better choice.
And speaking of showing a better path, I hear that in some states they do provide mandatory rehabs for people who are on substance abuse. And I can understand, how do you present Christ to someone who is high, who
Absolutely.
can't even
Right.
coherently carry a conversation?
Right.
So they need some sort of time or a safe place where they could be rehabilitated, where they could just kind of stay there for a while and get their senses back.
It's helpful, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. Because guess what? The other people staying at that place are also drug users. They're also people with unresolved pain issues in their life. And by being around those people, that's another layer of bondage that they're under. So even when you remove the drugs from that situation, those people still make bad decisions because they're surrounded by other people that are struggling with that addiction to get out of it. It's very difficult. Now we do have some really good Christ-centered rehabilitation programs in Portland and Vancouver, and those work, and they work really well. But you have to have Christ be part of the equation.
Well, that's what I mean. I personally spent some time visiting some places, some rehabs, and I can see change in people.
Yes.
I mean, I talk to them. They're the ones who used to be at the very bottom.
Right.
They got out of it, and they are now helping someone else. And
Right.
They know how to talk to those people. When I talk to them, I tend to believe what people tell me. I tend to not see
Right.
through their words and their body language. And the guy who just went through this, he's like, he's been lying to you.
Right. Right.
I mean, they can see this because they themselves kind of went through this, and they know how to talk to these people. They know how to help them out.
Right.
But I think, like you say, it has to be Christ-centered, and that would be the only way. I mean, I personally don't see any other way of giving them free drugs, clean needles,
Right.
free housing, and who would in their say right mind, if that could be said so, come out of the state if you got free drugs, you got a clean place, someone pays for your housing, brings you food. Why even get out of it? And that's
Right.
people say. Well, I would think that population of drug addicted people would only grow if you do that sort of a policy.
It does, or it will, and it does. And we see that happening every day.
So on the practical note, if you're driving on the freeway, you get off ramp, there is a person with a sign asking for money, asking for change, or they come up to you, should you give them money?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Because that money can empower their addiction or the sin that they're struggling with. You should consider giving them food, or consider talking to them about Jesus. What I like to do is give them Bibles. So I'll keep bags packed in my car. They'll have food items and a Bible. You can go to the dollar store and buy Bibles for $1. And I put a Bible in the bag and I hand it to them. And I offer to pray with them. If you can give them food, if you can give them God's Word, it does make a difference in their life. I've had people give me a hard time. They've said, Greg, you're giving them those Bibles. Who knows what they're going to do with them? They could toss it in the bushes. But God says, my word shall never return void. And once you put God's Word into play, it will have an impact. Even if the landscaper finds it in the bushes and comes to Jesus, it will have an impact. And I've seen it happen. I used to stamp my cell phone number on the inside pages of the Bibles, and I had people call me from hotel rooms. They found the Bible in the room and started to read it. And I had a guy call me who was a transvestite and said, Greg, I'm so tired. He said, I want to talk to Pastor Greg. I said, there's no Pastor Greg, but I'm here to talk to you. He said, I want to come out of this lifestyle and I want to come to Jesus Christ. I want to start going to church. Can you please help me? Not the person I gave the Bible to. So I know that when you put God's Word into play, that it delivers results, and I trust in that.
On the other note, as far as practical advice, should people come into close contact with these people, shake their hand, come up and be very close to them? Is there any chance of bodily harm or some sort of a harm that could come to a person who means well and wants to help, but maybe doesn't take into account that that's a homeless person, that a person could be under influence or some other problems?
So I would encourage people to interact with the homeless in a safe way. Don't go into a homeless camp that's out of sight from the road. If you're talking to homeless people, talk to them right there on the side of the street where they're holding their sign.
So you're saying
open.
Don't go and visit their shelter.
I wouldn't recommend that anyone do that alone. I think that if you have experience working with the homeless and you have a group of people, it's okay. But for just the people that are maybe watching this program, Dima, that are by themselves and they want to do something, talk to the homeless people that are standing with the sign on the side of the street corner. You can touch them, you can shake their hand, you shouldn't be afraid of that. But if you see open sores or you see blood present, of course, use your best judgment. But we have a very simple principle. We pray before we go out to talk to the homeless. We pray. And we believe that God is powerful enough to protect us. And He does, and He has, and He will. And so we don't worry about infection or contamination. It's kind of like the story of the Good Samaritan. I'm sure he looked horrible laying in the ditch, right? This person who was robbed. But don't let that scare you. Sometimes God puts you there in that place at that time so that you can represent Jesus to that person. And don't be afraid to do that.
And I mean, it is very difficult. We as Christians, and not even just Christians, but any decent human being, you go by and you see someone just laying on the concrete.
Yeah.
And you want to help this person, but I mean, how do you help him?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you suggest if I go by and I see just someone laying on a road?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I'm a healthy person, but I know if I laid like this for 10 minutes,
Right.
you could only take me to ER from there.
That's right.
My back would hurt. I would probably have all
That's
kinds of physical problems. How do these people even get through one night?
Oh, it's difficult, and sometimes you can tell that it's difficult for them. They'll be in a lot of pain, or they'll be upset, irritable. But they recognize the authority of Jesus Christ. They recognize the kingdom. When you come with food or with hot soup for them or a warm jacket that you want to give them, they recognize the authority of Jesus Christ. It's amazing. We had a homeless man who we approached. In fact, it was right off of Johnson Creek Boulevard in 205. And I said, do you believe in prayer? And he said, I believe that I am God. And he was very kind of like not aggressive with us, but just very confrontational with us in that
forceful.
way. Mm-hmm. I said, well, we're here to represent Jesus Christ, and we believe in prayer. And when we prayed today, he led us to you, and we have some things that we want to give you, and we want to love you today and tell you about Jesus. And when we prayed together, I said, you know, given your credentials that you told us, maybe you want to say a prayer with us here. Mm-hmm. And he prayed, and Dima, he delivered the most polite prayer that I've ever heard in my life. He, even though he was aggressive with us and confrontational, joking with us in that way, he wasn't willing to pray and say that. He recognized the authority, and he delivered the most polite prayer I've ever heard, because that authority is recognized. I've had people that I've been talking to, and one of their friends will say a bad word, and they'll say, shh, don't say that. You know, Greg's here. Don't talk like that around him. It's not because I'm particularly one way or the other. It's because they recognize Jesus Christ in me. And I think they understand that there's authority and power there in that kingdom. And I promise you, if you pray to the people that are listening to this, if you pray first, and you ask Jesus to be with you and to bless you in this, nothing bad will happen to you, and you'll be protected. And those people that you talk to will recognize the power and the authority of the true kingdom that you represent.
But at the same time, wouldn't you agree that if it's a girl or a group of girls, they should probably use their judgment,
yes,
and not put themselves in harm's way?
Yes,
simply
yes,
because,
right.
Unfortunately, this world is full of evil, and
yes,
they should use their judgments on
100%.
On that.
Agree. We never allow women to go by themselves to talk to the homeless. And if a woman is to go and talk to the homeless, she should be dressed appropriately, right?
Okay.
And kind of a lot of the homeless people lay on the street, so we don't want them wearing, you know, any kind of clothing that might be revealing to that person. Right. So we do have ground rules about how we approach the homeless, especially when there's female volunteers that are involved, for safety reasons. But at the end of the day, we always default to the protection of Jesus over us.
And it does work. I agree with you. I've seen it personally where people are very puffed up, but when you ask them to pray, and I've seen it at the weddings. Sure. And, you know, our church, we have a lot of weddings, and when you wed people, and sometimes there is a father who is not a churchgoer. He does, sure. he does not believe in God. Right. But you would say, these are your children, so why don't you say a word of blessing? Okay, you can't pray. What? And it is very interesting to see how they change all of a sudden, and all the haughtiness, everything goes out of them, and they are humble, and they understand that there is a higher power, even though 5 minutes ago they were puffed up, and they were. You don't even feel like God Himself can talk to them.
That's right. That's very interesting.
So, should people invite these people to church? Should they bring them over?
Mm-hmm. I would say once you have a relationship with that person, then you can invite them to church. What we want to demonstrate to them is a genuine love and a real relationship.
But how do you invite him? He can't travel. I mean,
Sure,
obviously, you
sure.
find someone under overpass and you
Sure.
say, well, come to church.
Sure,
How
sure.
is he going to walk? How do you do that practically?
Yeah. So if you find somebody that you decide to talk to who's homeless, and they're struggling, and you can relate to them, just like you told me when you watched the video, you could relate to that gentleman, right? When you can relate to them and you understand that there's some goodness there, and that they maybe want to change their life, you start building that relationship with them. It's perfectly fine to offer to bring them to church with you. But there's a couple of things that you need to consider. And we're speaking at a high level here. There's probably people listening that are going to say, well, what if I'm female and I'm by myself? Set that aside for now, right? The people are usually very self-conscious because of their appearance. Usually they haven't showered recently. So they smell bad, or maybe they, self-conscious of the way their hair looks, or they haven't shaved in a long time. So what we would offer to do is to bring them some clean clothes to wear, just to make them feel more comfortable. And then we would make a rule with them that they can't be under the influence of any substances if we pick them up and bring them to church. So they'd have to be clean. And what that did is it allowed us to bring probably half a dozen people to church with us, one of whom stuck and is still here today. And praise the Lord for that. 1 out of 6, I'll take that. So we had an opportunity to do that, and it worked really, really well. But they need to be, you need to have some kind of relationship with them. What you don't want to do is get in the bus, stop at every corner, pull people in and just drive them over to the church, because there's going to be a lot of dynamics at play there. They might not feel comfortable. They might be high or under the influence, right? So we want to make sure we have a relationship with that person first and feel comfortable.
Well, as far as bringing people to church, the reason why I'm asking is we had a few families that come to church, but they're not interested in Christ. They're not interested in faith. All they're interested in, well, give me that sum of money. I need this. And if you don't do this, then you don't love me. How are you a Christian if you don't want to take care of me and give me this sum of money that I'm asking? Right.
That's a tough situation. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of money, so I don't have to worry about that.
Well, they're not asking. They're not asking any particular person. They're asking from the church. And you're trying to explain to these people that we can't just give out money, and no one pastor in the church can just write you a check from church. That's not how it works.
This is something where you pointed it out perfectly. There has to be a relationship, right? And you have to understand that they're seeking the Lord. If they're seeking the Lord and you feel like that's happening, and they're desperate and they're hungry, or they don't have a place to live, go out of your way, go to the 10th mile to help them. If you don't think that they're really seeking the Lord, if they're just there for a buck, insist on that relationship and building that relationship. That would be my best advice. And usually, if you do a good job of building a relationship with them, you get to find out pretty quickly whether or not they're genuine about their desire to seek the Lord. I'll tell you right now, and there's probably some people that would disagree with me, if they're seeking the Lord and they have needs, I would say help them with everything. Help them as much as we can. Continue to encourage them moving in that direction. If we can do that and they're saved, then the money that we spent really is immaterial, because God can always give us more money. And all the angels in heaven rejoice when one person comes to salvation in Jesus Christ.
Amen there. So another question people would ask is it safe to take them home? I mean, should I take that person home where they can use a shower, where they could clean themselves?
Yeah.
Is it a safe thing to do? Would you advise people to do that? Or would that be something that it should better not be done?
I probably would not advise that. Now, that's a really tough question to kind of answer from the comfort of the studio here in my chair, because there's a real dynamic that occurs when you start getting to know the person. You start finding out a lot about them. And that gentleman that is in the video with his wife and his small child, I absolutely would consider bringing them into my home, because I understand who they are, and I understand, I feel like I have a sense for that relationship. But I think that there are some people out there who do that too quickly, prematurely. And oftentimes what happens is you get a situation where the person, everyone that's done that I know is still alive. Nothing bad happened to them. But they had a really difficult time with that person after they came into their home. So I think that it's something where you should have a real relationship with them first. But better to bring them to church than to bring them home, in my opinion. If you can bring them to church as a first priority, I think that's a much better way to prioritize it.
So would that be helpful for these people if there was a safe place with say a bathroom, a gate or a fence, some sort of a protection where they could be? And I mean, I understand it would be very uncomfortable to invite them to your house and you don't know how they are psychologically. I mean, they've been on the street a long time. I mean, even us, I go out camping for a week, I go back home, and it feels very odd. After being camping for a week to go back in the house. I can't even imagine if someone lives for years on a street and then for the first time they find themselves in a house.
That's right. For the viewers in your audience, I would say that bringing them to your home really isn't going to help them. They need Jesus. They need Jesus. And that needs to happen first. They need to have a desire for Jesus. Before we put a roof over their head, before we put clean clothes on them, those are not things that are going to help them. Keep in mind, there's so many programs out there to help the homeless that will give them a bed to sleep in, that will give them a roof over their head, that will give them all the food they can eat. They're not, the poverty that they're suffering from, Dima, is not a lack of food or clothing or shelter. It's a lack of love. That's the real poverty that they're suffering from.
So let's just say there are people who are watching this program. And this program is primarily for our church, our own church. And they're watching this and they're like, well, I want to help. I want to get involved. Where do we go from here? What do we do?
Sure. So we, as it stands right now, I have a small group and we do homeless ministry every other Wednesday. You're always welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to accommodate that. But you don't have to find a homeless ministry group. You don't have to find an outreach organization. It's as simple as deciding to hand some food to that person with a Bible. It's as simple as spotting that 6-year-old in your neighborhood and just buying an extra coat when you're school shopping. It's as simple as that. I always try to tell people, don't wait, because I hear this a lot from people. I'm waiting, I'm trying to find an organization, I'm making a lot of phone calls. And sometimes God taps us on the shoulder and says, go do that. And we say, yes, Lord. Let me just start a 501c3. Let me get 95 volunteers. Let's figure out the budget. Let's come up with rules for our organization. Let's get some buses donated to us. And I think that at the end of the day, the Lord looks at that and says, I just wanted you to go spread the gospel. I didn't ask you to do all of that, right? And I think we overcomplicate things sometimes. It's as simple as taking that one step.
But at the same time, someone might feel very uncomfortable for the first time to go out. Would that be okay if they come up to you and say, Greg, take us with you. We just want to see how it is done.
Absolutely.
We want to see how you approach these people,
Absolutely.
how you talk to them.
Absolutely.
Would that be something that you would be willing to
There's nothing I would love more than for someone to come up to me and want to do that. And I think that if that's something that Jesus Christ has put on your heart and you're listening to this message, take action on that. Don't wait and regret the fact that you never acted on that. Take action on that. Come talk to me. Come talk to Dima, and we'll make sure to get you taken care of.
Since you've been doing this for a while, do you find this ministry fulfilling? Do you find this, I don't know if I should say interesting, or do you find that you want to do it, or do you make yourself go out and do it?
So God told me to do it. And the one thing that I would like to think I've gotten better at doing since I was born again is listening to God. And God told me to do it. And I believe, if you read Isaiah 58, I believe that it's God's will for us to help the poor. It's a thankless job. It's not something where you're going to go to Mexico and take some fun pictures and eat some fun cuisine and hold the kids up on your shoulders. This is not that kind of ministry. When you help the poor, when you help the homeless, it's a thankless ministry. Oftentimes you don't get to see the results of what you've done. Mm-hmm. You don't ever get to see the seeds that you're planting grow. But it's a ministry of plant and water, plant and water, plant and water. And God yields the harvest.
To your comment on this, I could say that I read about one person who came out of this homeless lifestyle, who was very liberal in his worldview, mm-hmm. and it actually ended him there on the streets. And he said that the reason why I changed is because the only people who really helped me, not talked about it, but really helped me, mm-hmm. were the Christians. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see other groups in there. The only groups that I saw helping us out were Christians who really stretched their hand out and loved that person, talked to him, mm-hmm. and kind of gave him back his humanity, because I can understand why a person would feel down and would feel low and self-conscious conscious on what's happening with him, because it is very it is terrible to what happens to people. Mm-hmm. And again, it gets very difficult when you see these are human beings, these are people just like us, and you see them in such a horrible state. So there is a way to help them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the way to help them is to connect them to Jesus. And that's our job as representatives of his kingdom.
So at the end of the program, I would like to say that, number one, keep your family strong.
Yes.
And keep your relationship with the Lord strong, because none of us are immune from this.
That's
if
right.
Economy goes down, you can't make your house payments, you can't buy things that you are taking for granted now. Mm-hmm. I mean, things could happen. And at the same time, if you are strong in the Lord and you keep your family together, mm-hmm. you can always help each other out. Mm-hmm. If you break up your family, don't take care of your kids, your kids are not part of your life, and there is just no communication whatsoever, you just expose yourself and your children more and more to this.
Right.
And then on the other hand, as far as helping someone else, it can be done and it should be done. And I mean, when I talk to you and I examine my heart, I think a lot of times I just turned away from those people.
Yeah.
Because I find myself...
Me too.
There's nothing inside of me that wants to turn to them, and you always kind of expect worse out of people, mm-hmm. not even thinking that they could really have some serious problems that drove them to that lifestyle. That's right.
The one thing that I want to say, just as kind of a final thought, I think that if we grew up in Christian families, or we've been walking with the Lord for a while, sometimes we wonder, is there more to this? How do I really see God's promises fulfilled in my life mm-hmm. as a believer? I talk to a lot of people that it seems like they're well established in their faith, but they're looking for something more. They want a closer, more intimate connection with God. And I can tell you that since I started serving the homeless, I've seen amazing things happen in my life. And I'm not saying it's a cause and effect relationship. I'm not seeking that, and I'm not expecting that. But if you go back and you read the words of the prophet Isaiah, and he talks about the true fasting. He talks about the Israelites who were bowing their heads like reeds and clothing themselves in sackcloth and ashes, and wondering why their prayers weren't answered. And God responded to them through the prophet Isaiah, and he said, this is the kind of true fasting that I like to see from my people. Go and clothe the naked. Mm-hmm. Go and feed the hungry. Bring in the poor wanderer and give them shelter. And he said, when you do this, you will call on me and I will answer, here am I. And I think that certainly has been true in my life. And I want to encourage people, if you're feeling that tug on your heart, answer that calling and do something to love the poor and the homeless, because you might be surprised someday when you need help and you call out to the Lord, He will say,
Yes.
here am I, and the blessings will abound.
And I can say from my personal life, every time I got help from people, it was always from people who I cannot repay them. And I don't know why that is. And every time I help someone else, those people, they have no way of repaying me for this. And when I look at this, if you are helping a homeless person, that homeless person has no way in the world to repay you.
No.
And sometimes they won't even say thank you. Sometimes they will even
That's right.
think that you are taking some guilt trip in helping them, but your intentions are wrong, or you don't really want to help them. You just want to kind of calm your conscience because now you think that you helped someone and now you're a good Samaritan.
Right.
And they might see that and respond badly to you. But keep in mind, you are helping someone who will never repay you. But when you need help, just like you said, someone else will come out of nowhere.
That's right.
And you will feel the same way. I can't repay that person. I have no means, and I might not even meet that person a second time.
That's right.
And it does happen. I can attest to that.
Absolutely, and not just through another person, but when you're struggling and you need God to really reach out and touch someone's heart, whether it's a child in your family that's acting rebellious, or whether it's a health problem, God will personally intervene and help you, because to those who are faithful, He shows Himself faithful.
Well, Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your ministry and your work. And
Thank you.
I would advise people who are in our church, if you would like to help, please see Greg.
Thank you.
And we might come up with some sort of easier way to get this done, because sometimes people, they want to help, but there's just no means. But once they see how easy that is, and that there is a real fruit to their labor, that becomes much easier.
That's right.
All right,
Thank you so
brother.
much, Dima.
God bless you.
God
And
bless you too, brother.
thank you very much.
Thank you.